I would now like to introduce today's presenters. We have Michael Jensen. He's the Chief Research Guru at Everest Group. As co-founder of our research practice, Michael offers profound insights and analysis to enterprises and service providers alike. He leverages extensive experience identifying and understanding emerging trends to help organizations maximize their global service efforts. Michael is particularly well known for his ability to hypothesize clever and challenging ideas based on fact-based insights across business and IT processes, sourcing models, and industries. Shirley Hung is Vice President Research at Everest Group. Shirley has 20 years of experience working in various industry sectors in areas of strategy, process improvement, benchmarking, planning, and budgeting, workforce planning, and total rewards. She advises senior stakeholders of global services, including enterprises, service providers, and investors, in strategy, mandates, and initiatives. Her responsibilities include leading Everest Group's research in the areas of finance and accounting outsourcing, procurement outsourcing, and customer experience management services. Skand Bhargava is Practice Director at Everest Group. Skand manages Everest Group customer experience management memberships, offerings, and custom research. He has advised Fortune 1000 enterprises on issues related to customer experience sourcing strategy, service provider selection, and portfolio optimization. He has also leveraged his experience in customer experience and contact center space to support service providers in their go-to-market initiatives and advise large private equity firms in their investments in the space. I would now like Michael to take it away here.
All right, thank you, Colin. And good morning, good evening, depending on where you're at. And we really want to just jump right into the content here. And so I'm going to give a little context of what we're trying to accomplish here, and then we'll give a little more background, and then we'll jump into the actual study results. So I think we're all familiar with, everything digital now. Digital has become the buzzword over the last several years, and it really has taken on a life of its own in terms of expectations and capabilities. And so there's no difference in the customer experience here. Traditional call centers are changing. There's not necessarily the preferred way of communication. And as we looked at how customers and businesses want to interact, we're seeing some significant changes there. So the hypothesis for this analysis is really talking about how do we leverage outsourcing and outsourcing relationships to rapidly improve the customer experience and take it to the next level. What you see on the slide show right now here is a very contextual conversation around how we are seeing digital in 2019. And what we wanted to do is just kind of give you a quick snapshot, and then we'll show how this all fits together as we go through the analysis. But so there are many different aspects of digital. You'll see the three layers here, and we have the automation layer, we have the insights layer, and the interaction layer. And each of those layers has a different business objective. One's focused on the process efficiency, one's driven by business outcome, and one's improving the user experience. And if you were to look at each one of those little circles there, it's easy to say that there are probably a dozen or 24 different vendors and solutions that are being developed for each one of those circles, if you will, in this. And so you have dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of value propositions and capabilities being put together here. Today, we're going to look at that top layer. And what we're really going to focus in on is how the services organizations, outsourcing firms, are helping to engage with enterprises to provide a superior outcome or a superior deliverable in their interactions with the customers. So with that, I want to turn it over to Shirley here, and she's going to talk to you about some of the additional context, and then we'll dive into the results.
Thank you, Michael. So as Michael was saying, the world is changing, and we see on the left-hand side of the slide some of those drivers of change, which are disruptive business models, technology advancements, and more elevated customer expectations. And all of these are driving companies to rethink their customer experience strategies. The wheel on the right highlights the areas that companies need to address. Starting on the green segment and moving clockwise, companies need to ensure that they have a customer-focused organizational culture. They need to understand what their customer needs at a detailed level and utilize that insight to improve the way they provide customer support. Companies also need to be led by technology to achieve required operational efficiency. And finally, underlying all this, high quality talent is essential to delivering on the personalized experience that empowered customers are demanding. In order to achieve that holistic customer experience that we're all talking about, companies need to shift from their focus on optimization and cost containment to business outcomes. It's no longer about delivering customer services, but delivering personalized and intelligent experiences. A sole focus on voice delivery is no longer sufficient. Companies must move towards omni-channel delivery, and this means shifting focus from human-centric delivery to technology-enabled solutions. What we see is that CCO providers can play a critical role in helping companies deliver on their customer experience strategies. Working with a CCO provider that is flexible, have a partnership mindset, domain and process expertise, as well as capabilities in technology-driven innovation can lead to a very successful and fruitful relationship, and thus that elevated customer experience outcomes that all companies are striving for.
Okay, well, so with that, let's dive into the study itself. And so the way we frame this is using our Pinnacle analysis. And so our Pinnacle analysis, let me give you a little bit of background here. It's really designed to evaluate not different service providers, but evaluate different enterprises. And so each dot on here represents the performance of one of the study participants. If you look at the outcomes on the y-axis on the left side, you'll see that we have cost impact, operational impact, and business impact. And we're really trying to look at those as an aggregate. And then as we compare and contrast that to the capability maturity along the bottom here, where we're looking at 5 different aspects. And the goal here is to understand how capability impacts the outcomes. And what you'll see here is a general, in the dot plot, you'll see a general movement of the dots from the bottom left to the upper right. And in the upper right, we'll have what we've labeled the Pinnacle Enterprises. And so when you see all of the analyses, you're going to see a comparison between those in the upper right and those in the rest of the dot plot. And so the goal is to show that cause and effect relationship. You'll notice one of the things I'm always interested in and making sure that we have a good analysis is when you see no dots in the upper left and you see no dots in the bottom right. And the reason you're looking for that is you want to make sure that we've got a good analytical tool here that says if you have no capability, you don't get the corresponding outcomes. And similarly, if you have good outcome or good capabilities, you have a much higher chance of better outcomes. And so throughout this rest of the analysis, you're going to see the green versus the rest of the plots, and we'll take it from there. So one thing we're going to do is we wanted to start out with a quick poll. So we wanted to hear from you in the conversations. And so our first question is going to be, in 2019, what are you focused on improving most from your customer experience initiatives? So we're going to open up the poll there, ask you to select one as your primary: cost savings, average handle time, first contact resolution, customer satisfaction, and conversion rates. And so go ahead and post your answers there. And let me see how the results are coming in here. Okay, we'll give you a little bit more chance to vote here. Okay, looks like we got a good percentage of people that have voted. All right, let's go ahead and show the results. And it's a unanimous decision or a majority decision here toward customer satisfaction. You see a little bit of cost savings and first contact resolution, but customer satisfaction is the goal. So I think you'll see that when we show the Pinnacle data, we're going to show you that that's substantially supported by what this audience is feeling with those that we found in the study. Okay, so we're going to show you the answers on the next slide. We're going to show it to you in basically take the analytics down into cost impact, operational impact, and business impact. We're going to show you one page for each of these, and Shirley and Scott are going to walk through some of those analytics. Next slide.
All right. As we take you through the analysis on the cost, operational, and business impact over the next few pages, as well as capability maturity later on. A quick note: we have a bunch of bar charts over here. The quick note over here is the green bars refer to what we have defined as the Pinnacle Enterprises, the top right corner of the graph that Michael was referring to a couple of slides back. And the blue one are referring to the non-Pinnacle or the other enterprises. So that's a quick way of aligning to what we have outlined in our analysis over the next few slides. Okay, on the cost impact front, the Pinnacle Enterprises are able to achieve 33% higher cost savings vis-a-vis their peers. To put that in context, they are able to generate 12% annualized steady state TCO reduction compared to 9% that their peers, the other enterprises, are able to do through their contact center outsourcing relationship. And that is huge, right? That 3% of saving directly hitting the top line is huge for any kind of enterprise in any business. Now, while that is happening on the overall contact center front, when it comes to digital customer experience, and Michael talked about the impact of digital and the role digital transformation is playing in the business right now. I'm looking at the charts at the bottom. The one on the left talks about the average ROI from digital customer experience investments, and you can see that the bars in green, the Pinnacle Enterprises are able to deliver higher ROI, 14% compared to 8% for the peers. More importantly, they're able to achieve that in a shorter time period of 13 months compared to 17 months that other non-Pinnacle enterprises take in order to achieve break-even for their digital customer experience investments. Next, we move to the operational impact. Now, a study showed that majority of the Pinnacle enterprises are focusing on streamlining contact center processes in collaboration with their CCO providers, right? And that is important. In contrast, other enterprises primarily focus on managing fluctuating call volumes. What we observe over here is the difference in the outlook and the focus that operationally the Pinnacle enterprises have vis-a-vis the others. What that leads to is shown in the bottom half of this page, right? We looked at 3 key operational metrics: AHT, average handle time, first contact resolution, FCR, and finally channel transfer rate. For each of these metrics, by focusing on the most strategic piece, that is streamlining the process, the operations of the contact center world, rather than looking at call center volumes, Pinnacle enterprises are able to achieve significantly higher impact on their operations. And these are then translated into enhanced customer experience as we discuss it in the next slide. On the business impact front, Pinnacle enterprises are able to deliver superior strategic impact through their CCO relationships. We looked at some of the most pertinent strategic metrics similar to what we did in the previous slide on the operational metrics, and the analysis shows that Pinnacle enterprises achieve 24% customer satisfaction, and go back to the survey that we just ran. The poll showed that for majority of the audience and the enterprises that are looking into 2019, customer satisfaction is top of mind. What Pinnacle Enterprises are able to do is achieve 24% CSAT improvement compared to just 9% when it comes to other enterprises. Similarly, on some of the other strategic initiatives, such as conversion rate, cross-sell, upsell rates, they are 2.4 times to 1.8 times higher improvement that Pinnacle Enterprises are able to achieve vis-a-vis other enterprises.
So Scott, now when I look at these results here, we're seeing, not just a difference here between the Pinnacle Enterprises and the rest of the enterprises, but we're also seeing in general really good results and improvement factors across all of the dimensions. So whether it's cost, it's the operational, or the strategic, the benefits here.
Absolutely, I agree there, Michael.
So, all right, so as we move from the y-axis and now we start to look at the capability side of the equation, we wanted to start out with a quick poll here, and we'll open that up here shortly. But so we really want to understand, what is your biggest obstacle to improving the customer experience? So is it the sponsorship from executives? Is it the availability of budget? Is it technology? Is it access to talent? Is it support from your outsourcing partner? So if you go ahead and vote right now. All right, I can see the results coming in. Right now it's a horse race. Give it a few more minutes here. And the results are changing. It is literally a horse race. Get your vote in here quickly. We'll give it another 3 seconds and then we'll close out the poll. All right, I have to say the lead changed multiple times here. Okay, all right, so what we're seeing here is the limitations in technology is actually the number one. That's a little bit surprising to me. Access to the right talent is the number 2. And then we have a tie for sponsorship and support from your outsourcing partner. So, and budget's really not the issue. And we've seen that across many of the different analyses we've done over the last few quarters here, where budget's not the problem, and talent. And this is probably a little different. The technology is a little bit on the high side here. So anyway, so let's look at how these results compare to specific aspects of the study. And I'll turn that over to that.
Thanks, Michael.
Shirley. Yeah, turn it over to you, Shirley.
Yeah. If I can go back to the Pinnacle model and just draw your memory back to what Michael went through around that matrix. Scott described our findings in terms of the y-axis and or the outcomes that companies achieved from partnering with CCOs. In the next few slides, we will be describing our findings on the x-axis, or the maturity of companies' capabilities. I'm not going to get into the detail on this slide, but we'll be talking about companies' capabilities in the areas of strategy, technology adoption, engagement model, approach, and organization talent, and how that differs for Pinnacle Enterprises versus other enterprises. So Pinnacle Enterprises outsource to meet an increasingly digitally enabled customer base. That is the primary driver for outsourcing. Meanwhile, other enterprises are still primarily outsourcing to reduce operating costs. Why is this important? This really drives a different set of capabilities that companies demand from their service providers. So Pinnacle Enterprises are seeking higher order capabilities such as thought leadership, consulting skills, and insights into consumer behaviors. So essentially 75% of Pinnacle Enterprises have said all 3 of those type of capabilities are in high demand. But meanwhile, other companies are are focusing on technology tools and expertise. So that is 45% actually of other companies view that as their top capability that they're looking for. This actually influences then how enterprises approach their relationship with their CCO providers. So Pinnacle Enterprises view their CCO providers as a key pillar to delivering on their digital CX goals, whereas almost half of other enterprises really don't view them as strategically.
When we look at the engagement model employed by both the Pinnacle as well as non-Pinnacle enterprises, there are two things that stand out very clearly. And let me draw your attention to the left-hand side graph over here. The Pinnacle enterprises inevitably engage CCO providers and seek their inputs on key strategic CX topics. As we see on the graph over there, let me remind you, all Pinnacle enterprises that we studied did so, whereas 1/3 of other enterprises didn't. That's a major statement, right? So that partnership model that one needs to have in a successful relationship is clearly standing out in the way CCO providers engage or are engaged by Pinnacle enterprises on strategic pieces. There's another thing that happens in parallel, right? It's not just engagement that happens, it's the fact that it happens much earlier in the process for the Pinnacle enterprises compared to others. This early engagement is a clear differentiator, as you can see on the right-hand side graph. Clearly, the difference between the green and the blue bars is most pronounced when it comes to design and ideation stage, the first stage of any technology, any engagement for that matter. And once you are able to do that, it's still a kind of level field when it comes to planning, implementation, and post-implementation support pieces. One of the key things we understand as to why Pinnacle enterprises do so, and therefore, as we were discussing earlier, yield better outcomes, is it allows them to gather inputs from a wider spectrum of sources and therefore create a compelling and lasting customer experience. Next, let's look at technology adoption as a capability and how Pinnacle enterprises compare to other enterprises. Similar to what I highlighted earlier in the previous slide, Pinnacle enterprises have adopted a partnership approach even when it comes to technology and its adoption in their contact center environment. And here again, there are two key practices that stand out. One, they engage with their providers in a consultative role rather than merely somebody implementing the solution, the technology solution, or maintaining it on an ongoing basis. A large majority of Pinnacle enterprises do so at 75%. And when compared to where it stands for others, wherein just 33% of the other enterprises that we studied did so, you can see the huge margin coming through. Secondly, there's a joint development of solution wherein the enterprise technology team work with the provider technology team in order to deliver these technology solutions, the next generation technology solution, so central to delivering digital customer experience. That helps move the discussion away from a traditional buyer-vendor relationship to a more exchange of ideas, joint development, and thought leadership kind of a relationship. As the data shows, that joint development happens in case of all Pinnacle enterprises, whereas it's just half of the non-Pinnacle who look at joint development on the technology front. what all of this does, both these practices lead to a more satisfied enterprise when it comes to ability of their contact center outsourcing provider to deliver on the technology front, while 50% satisfactory rate, so to say, is not great. It is 2.5 times of, or slightly more than that, of 19% respondents saying that they are happy with the technology capability of their third-party providers, which the other enterprises call out. Let's look at the last of the capability maturity pieces, which is organization and talent. Herein, on the left-hand side, what we have called out is the fact that Pinnacle Enterprises ensure customer-facing units such as BUs and sales and marketing team are the ones that are spearheading the contact center outsourcing engagements, and they drive the interaction with the CCO providers. In more than 60% of the Pinnacle Enterprises, that's the case. If we compare that to the non-Pinnacle or the other enterprises, in those places, it is largely the contact center teams or the procurement team who are leading the interaction, thereby not allowing a direct interaction of the contact center outsourcing provider team with the real beneficiary of the services, which is the business units or the sales and marketing unit, the ones that interact directly with the customers on an ongoing basis. The other piece on this front is the way the talent is looked at, and especially with the focus on digital CX, the next frontier for agent workforce, as you can look at it. The key learning for us based on the study is that while all Pinnacle Enterprises are working closely with their CCO providers to upskill, reskill the agent workforce and help them be more productive in the digital age, more than 30% of other enterprises do not engage actively with CCO providers on talent management front, and therefore open themselves to talent-related risks.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Skand. And so what we've done is just kind of walk through the key capabilities and the key outcomes in the Pinnacle model and try to show some differentiation between the things that mattered in the cause and effect relationship. I would remind participants, if you have a question, go ahead and type it into the question panel. And the next section we're going to move into, Shirley and I are going to talk about some of these implications for enterprises. And so there's a half a dozen of these that we've got set up here on the next slide here. So the key enterprises. Rather than walk down these, let's just start taking these one at a time here. So if we move to the first one, Shirley, we saw that there was benefit across cost savings as well as the operational and business impact here. What was your kind of thought process when you're looking at those results?
Yeah, so I think the real takeaway around this, when we look at how Pinnacle Enterprises behave differently from other enterprises, is that you cannot get what you do not expect. So you need to set higher expectations with your CCO provider. And by doing so, you will receive more value from that relationship. And this means clearly communicating on the capabilities you're expecting the CCO provider to bring in the areas of thought leadership, domain and process experience, next generation technologies, and innovation.
Yeah, and I think the beyond that too, and we'll talk about that coming up here, is how you enter into your commercial relationship. I think that becomes a really big part of the conversation. So a little bit about this is not just what your expectations are, but what you pay for. So the old saying is you pay for what you get. And so if you want the cheapest, you can get the cheapest, but that may not serve, trying to get to objectives like customer satisfaction. All right, so change those expectations. As we look at the next one here, we saw clear differentiation in the Pinnacle companies about how they engaged in making these improvements. And so we saw the data from that Skand showed was the inclusion in the ideation stage was critical. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so companies can achieve better business outcomes by tapping into the innovation teams and expertise within the CCO providers during the very beginning stages of a project. In addition to, the daily interactions that you have with the operational teams, you have to, companies need to kind of remind themselves that, CCO providers, this is their core business. They've been thinking a lot about these disruptive technologies and what impact it brings to their industry. So tap into that expertise, engage with their innovation teams, and make them part of the overall process. They know a great deal about what is taking place and how to best leverage that for their client base. Having access to their added brain power leads to better solutions. So don't wait until implementation to engage.
Yeah, and you need to make these things, actual events kind of conversations, because the local teams, they're there to serve and operate against the current standard. And so they have expertise that it will go deep in your customer requirements in your industry or the product or the service they're delivering. But the real gems in these organizations are actually fairly hot commodities in terms of they know what the leading edge technology is. They know what the leading edge practices are. They're seeing the best of the best when they go from client to client and prospect to prospect. And so getting their attention and to focus their attention on your account may take a little bit of screaming and loud voices. I don't know if you do it loud voices, but certainly concerted efforts to get their attention and help bring those ideas to the table. And so when you get that focus from your service provider, we obviously see results are great. All right, so we talked about the digital customer experience goals, and I think digital. I opened the presentation up with everything digital is important here, and it's not just one thing; it's many things. And so, talk to us about how you see the CCO providers providing that some of those new digital things.
Yeah. So just building off of what we just talked about in the previous slide, since customer experience is CCO providers' core business, they are oftentimes more knowledgeable and better positioned to leverage digital and next generation technologies than their clients, such as the chatbots and AI tools and so forth. So companies should collaborate closely with CCO providers to determine how best to leverage these technologies in the areas of advanced analytics and RPA in delivering a better customer experience. Investments in digital should also be measured in terms of their effectiveness, and CCO providers should also play a critical role in that, in determining, monitoring, and reporting on those performance metrics.
And one of the primary goals with all these new digital channels and technologies is to actually get rid of the call. I mean, I think that's an important part of the conversation and it's a challenge for the service providers as, it's a threat to their revenue stream by getting rid of calls. But I think at the end of the day, that's the ultimate in trying to get to customer satisfaction. So having the right channel and the right technology and the right way to engage with your customers is absolutely critical. So again, it goes back to, having that frank conversation with your service provider up front and then following through with it in adoptions and investments and changing of the contractual relationship that's likely required.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Michael. In speaking with the service providers, they're viewing that elimination of transactional work actually to be a very positive thing for their organization. They don't view it as a threat. In the sense that the clients that they've been working with to eliminate those voice calls have been so satisfied with that that they are allowing their CCO providers to do more higher value added activities that they and more complex work that they traditionally had kind of held on to. So CCO providers, generally speaking, welcome the opportunity to eliminate those mundane tasks because frankly for them, they also don't want to hold on to it. They want to move on to doing more insightful driven work for you.
Yeah, and as labor costs continue to rise, especially in core markets, the ability to make a margin for themselves is not driven based on being able to hire resources for cheaper than other people. It really comes to that value conversation. And then I go back to the other part of the dialogue here, that you pay for what you get. And I really, really strongly suggest take a look at the way that you pay for your results. So whatever's on your invoice is generally what you're going to get. And so if you say, hey, I want to pay for so many kind of butts and seats kind of type FTE require our labor units, that's pretty much what you're going to get. If you want to pay based on some kind of output and outcome, that's what you'll see, that movement toward that focus, and then it's much less around the labor, and it moves more toward the conversation of the desired outcome. All right, so let's move on to one of the thing that keeps CEOs and the rest of the C-suite up late at night, and we've always people have talked about talent in context. People are your most important asset. There's almost that cliche, and you wonder with some of the actions of senior management, do they really mean that, or is it just a nice to say statement? But I will say right now, the talent model is going to get extremely important, because we are starting to approach significant talent shortages in key markets. And I'm really speaking to the North American and European labor markets are becoming extremely tight. And so not only is the market tight, the demands of some of these new technologies are shrinking the pool by just the number of educated folks that are in that pool. Talk about talent in terms of the CCO providers.
Yeah, so CCO providers can deliver more value if enterprises have more of a partnering mentality towards recruitment and training and development. So I think the traditional model for outsourcing was to kind of toss the work across the fence, right? So you want to be hands off, you're trying to get rid of that work, and you're hiring somebody to take care of all those operational details on a day-to-day basis. But because of what Michael is kind of saying around these talent shortages and finding that kind of that gem in a pool of talent, the needle in the haystack, it requires a different approach, and it requires more of a partnering approach between the CCO providers and their client base. So an example of that was, I was speaking with a service provider a few days ago, and they were mentioning that clients tend to be very protective of their training content. They really didn't want the CCO provider to make any changes to it. But what they were explaining to me is that in many cases, if clients are more willing to be flexible and partner with them and accept some of their ideas around how that content should be delivered, then they could deliver more effective training programs to the agents. So instead of a traditional classroom setting that has a training program that spans several weeks, where the agent actually is not onboarded and up to speed for many weeks at a time, the training could be potentially more effectively delivered as micro learnings. So in segments of 5 to 10 minute modules, which can then serve a dual purpose. So once they're live and active in the environment, those modules can be reused as refreshers as needed. So working jointly together between companies and their CCO providers can help gain better access to high quality talent that is needed to deliver on better customer experience outcomes.
Yeah, and so I do believe that talent is going to be a chronic challenge for us. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. The only real long-term answer is to have more babies, but that usually takes about 20, 25 years to actually yield results in tangible numbers. So with that aside, the other part of this is really that, go back to the technology conversation and making those making the existing workforce more productive. And I think that's where like technologies like the RPA and some of the other automation technologies, the AI and the cognitive are going to actually make, so when you're having an engagement or a conversation when you're with a customer, the information is readily available, it's more insightful, it actually gets to the answer quicker, and or potentially even prevents the call from even happening. I think those are the conversations that are going to be part of it, the talent challenge as well. All right, so the last one we have here is, and this is really pointing to one of the specific questions. We didn't have it in the early slides, but really about who is the best organization set up to really engage in the conversation about making all this change happen. And there's certainly with some of the question was set up such a way, is it is the procurement organization? Do they just need to do a better job of changing the contract or pushing the supplier from a contractual standpoint? Another one of the answers, potential answers, was around it was at the call center itself. Talk about what you saw in the answers there that made the big difference and really was the most effective way of getting to a better result.
Yeah, so I guess it's a little bit common sense, right? Better customer experience outcomes are achieved when customer-facing teams within companies, such as the business lines, such as sales and marketing, that these organizations are the ones that lead CCO engagements. This really ensures then that the customer remains the focus. That being said, it doesn't mean that other teams, such as the contact center team and procurement, that they aren't important. They still need to be tightly integrated into the overall work. And so companies still need to ensure that there is that close alignment within their organization. And they need to also ensure that there's that visible senior management sponsorship that's there. The only way to achieve business goals and drive digital customer experience effectively oftentimes requires removing, roadblocks that exist inherently within companies, and having that executive level sponsorship will help mitigate those inefficiencies.
So we saw that both on the service provider, we're recommending make sure you get to the innovation teams that are within a service provider, but we're also saying here, it shouldn't be the on the ground service provider team and the actual call centers themselves, or those people managing those call centers. It's actually getting beyond that for both innovation as well as what the business requirements are.
Yeah, I think, normally at a day-to-day level, you're focused on very operational issues. And what we're saying across all of this is that you need to elevate that conversation to a strategic level. And the only way to do that is to ensure that customers are at the heart of what you do, is to make sure that if the business lines aren't kind of leading the engagement, that they are a fundamental part to those discussions.
Okay, with that's the formal remarks. We'll open it up to questions here, and again, type your question into the board there. I have one question here I'll take to start with. I think, Scott, I'm going to go to you on this one. It says, what kind of technology solutions have you observed enterprises engage CCO providers on? What's the current maturity of automation and chatbot solutions in the market?
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks, Michael. Wow, that's a really broad question. So let me talk about the quintessential technology solutions that were always there in the mix of any contact center outsourcing contract. So it started with the use of telephony solution for workforce management. That kind of expanded then to include some of the self-service solution. Operational analytics solutions started coming into the picture. Now these have become sort of table stakes, as one would call it. So the way I look at the question that has come in, especially looking at the second half of the question, is more about what we call as next gen technology solutions in the contact center customer experience management space. So once we start moving away from operational analytics, which is more inward looking, to more advanced predictive prescriptive analytics, which can help deliver uh, more top line impact than just bottom line impact. That's where things start getting interesting. Based on what we have seen so far, that's the kind of solution wherein a lot of differentiation starts coming into picture, and that differentiation just doesn't happen on the on the provider side. It also has an impact on the way the customers, the end consumers, start interpreting their relationship with the brand, which are the enterprises, and therefore it has a downstream impact on the way and the set of service providers that uh, the enterprises want to engage with. So yeah, that's where I have seen majority of the conversations going. The point around automation and chatbot solution, while it's buzz driven, I believe, there's a lot of talk around it. We haven't really seen widespread enterprise adoption of these solutions. Some of the RPA, robotic automation, process automation solution, have been useful to provide agent assist solution as well as after call work assist solution to within the customer experience management space. But the chatbots are still in fancy. In fact, we have been looking at and will be coming out with a study in a couple of weeks focused on that particular topic. And what we have learned so far is it's still early days. There's one of the issues people kind of grapple with is the lack of enough good data or data libraries available to train the chatbot to make it really intelligent enough to carry not just 20-30% of the conversation, but more like 70-80%, which would then start yielding enough positive impact to cover for the investments that one needs to make in order to deliver these solutions. That's how I kind of look at it.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think the agent assist, having that information, having the right information at the right time is extremely important. There's nothing more annoying than being on the call and then having the call center agent having to go on hold to go look for stuff, and you're sitting there wondering, well, why do I have to tell them everything about me? Shouldn't they know it? So anyway, all right. Let me another question here. I think, Cheryl, I'll go to this one over you. How are enterprises looking at CCO portfolio in the future?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I think in our study we do ask about whether companies are anticipating expanding their portfolio of providers, and whether they're thinking about kind of how they're thinking about that relationship kind of progressing. And what we found is that for the most part, enterprises are thinking about adding to their portfolio of providers. And I think that for Pinnacle Enterprises, that percentage was around 2/3. So 63% of Pinnacle Enterprises are looking to increase their number of providers, and 38% of other enterprises are doing so. And this is primarily due to wanting to access better quality agents and technology capabilities. So what we would say is that for companies, don't be afraid of exploring what capabilities are out there in the marketplace. And we're at a point of inflection in this industry where a lot of companies and service providers are trying to differentiate themselves, but all in slightly different ways. And there's this opportunity for companies to try to capitalize on that.
Yeah, and if we go back to that, referencing that chart that I had at the very beginning, when I said there was many different service providers and solutions and value propositions, in that digital spectrum. So all of the 3 different layers we showed here, it's almost dizzying to think about what the potential is. And I think, it's going to be increasingly more difficult for individual companies to keep up with all those technologies and keep up with all those potential solutions. So I think there will be more of a movement to, not because I can't find the labor, that'll still be a chronic issue, but more of a challenge on how do I keep up with all the latest ways, the latest technologies, and all the different channels and the value propositions that are available out there, without looking like you're stuck in the mud, presenting a 1990s call center solution. And I think that's the opportunity there, is to really kind of move the needle forward here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, got another question here, just came in. 1 second here. All right, what's your view on the use of collaborative supplier relationship tools to underpin and strengthen the governance? Scott, do you have an opinion on that one?
Yeah. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. So on this one, I think that's probably one of the key pieces we highlighted that underpins the way Pinnacle Enterprises interact with the contact center providers. That collaborative nature of the relationship it starts with the mindset, the approach that both the parties take to the relationship. In terms of the use of the collaborative tool itself, absolutely, why not? Again, the tool needs to support the practice that has been employed. It helps set the cadence, ensures that there are regular catch-ups. It also entails ensuring that there is transparency and clarity in terms of relaying information across both the parties. So yeah, I'm not sure what exactly was the nature of the answer that was being looked at, based on the study that we have conducted, as well as the interactions that I've had in the past with both the enterprises, the buyers of contact center outsourcing services, as well as the service provider. The need for collaboration is nobody contests that. The use of the tool obviously ensures that, as I said, there's a strong governance set in place, which means the cadence, availability of the right kind of stakeholders across both the parties, as well as ensuring that the nature of interaction is not tactical but more strategic in nature is ensured, is probably the right way to go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. With that, we're coming to the end of the session here. We have on the screen right here, and these slides will be sent to you in short order. You have our contact information here. On the next page, there's a number of ways to interact with us. You can check out our blog for perspectives on customer experience management. And then we have a whole host of related research that you'll be able to reference. Just click on the link when you get it. And with that, we thank you for your attention. And if there's anything we can do to help you explore deeper, we gave you the Reader's Digest version today. I think the actual analysis goes in excess of almost 100 pages. So let us know if we can help you on that. So thank you very much.